Stop blaming aging. What's really happening after 60 is something far more dangerous. Your body is quietly losing reserve capacity. In this video, I'll show you the 7 signals that reveal it years in advance and how to reverse the direction. One of the wisest physicians who ever lived, Shigeaki Hinohara, believed something radical even by today's standards. He said, "True health is not found on a piece of paper. It's revealed in how a person lives each day, how they move, how they recover, how they engage with the world." I had patients with textbook-perfect lab results who declined rapidly within a few years, and others with imperfect numbers who remained vibrant, mobile, and sharp well into their 80s and 90s. That contradiction should disturb you because it exposes a blind spot in how we define longevity. Think of the body the way Hinohara did, as a musical instrument. You wouldn't judge a violin by staring at its case or reading the manufacturer's label. You judge it by how it plays. Is the sound clear? Is it responsive? Does it recover after being pushed? Your body works the same way. Blood tests are just the case. The music is how you walk, how you stand up, how you balance, how you breathe after effort. That's the performance. And that performance tells us far more about how long and how well you're likely to live. This is where modern longevity science quietly agrees with old wisdom. Peter Attia has been very clear about this. The strongest predictors of long life are not isolated biomarkers. They are functional capacity and resilience. In plain language, how well your body performs under real-world demands and how quickly it bounces back afterward. Doctors don't always say this out loud, but in exam rooms and hospital wards, we watch certain signals very closely. Signals most people never measure. Signals you can't fake. Signals that reveal whether your body still has reserve or whether it's running on fumes. Here's the part that should get your attention. These signals begin to change years before obvious disease shows up. Long before a fall sends someone to the emergency room. Long before a hospitalization accelerates decline. Long before dementia steals confidence and independence. They whisper first. And because they whisper, most people ignore them until the consequences are loud and irreversible. I've seen it too many times. A single misstep, a slow recovery, a sudden fear of movement. And from there, life shrinks faster than anyone expects. That's why this conversation matters. Today, you're going to learn 7 longevity signals that doctors quietly trust more than most lab results. You'll learn how to check them at home, without equipment, without appointments, without fear. And most importantly, you'll understand why even small improvements in these signals can dramatically shift your aging trajectory. This isn't about chasing youth. It's about preserving function, dignity, and control over your own body. Because aging well was never about perfect numbers. It was always about staying capable and knowing how to listen when your body speaks. There is a moment in every long clinical career when patterns become impossible to ignore. One of the most revealing patterns I've seen has nothing to do with lab values or imaging results. It's the way a person walks down a hallway, not whether they walk, but how they move through space when no one is coaching them, no one is watching closely, and no machine is attached to their body. Walking speed has been quietly studied for decades, and among physicians who work with aging adults, it has earned a serious nickname, the 6th vital sign. Not because it sounds poetic, but because it integrates so many survival systems at once that it becomes brutally honest. Many people assume walking speed is simply a matter of personality. Some people are fast, some are cautious, some like to take their time. That assumption feels harmless, but it blinds people to what's really happening beneath the surface. When walking speed slows, it is rarely just a preference. It is usually the outward expression of multiple systems negotiating limited reserve. The brain is processing information more cautiously. Muscles are generating less force. Balance systems are demanding more attention. The heart and lungs are working harder to deliver the same output. What looks like a gentle stroll is often a quiet compensation. From a biological perspective, walking speed is one of the most integrated measurements the human body offers. It requires synchronized brain signaling, intact nerve pathways, sufficient muscle mass, joint stability, cardiovascular efficiency, and balance control. When any one of these systems weakens, the body adapts by slowing down, not as a flaw, but as a survival strategy. Slower movement reduces the risk of falling, overexertion, or error. The problem is that this adaptation also reveals reduced neurological and muscular reserve. In medicine, reserve is everything. It determines how well someone tolerates illness, surgery, stress, or even a bad night's sleep. A useful way to understand this is to think of walking speed like your body's download speed. When it's fast and smooth, information flows easily between systems. Movement feels automatic. When it slows, it's not because the destination changed, but because the infrastructure supporting the process is under strain. Something is buffering. Something is lagging. Doctors pay attention to this because studies consistently show that slower walking speed predicts higher risk of hospitalization, cognitive decline, and loss of independence years before those outcomes occur. The body announces trouble long before it collapses. I think of a woman I once cared for, Evelyn, 76 years old, sharp-minded, well-spoken, and diligent about her appointments. Her lab work was reassuring. Her scans showed nothing dramatic. But when she walked, there was a cautious rhythm to her steps, a subtle hesitation with each stride, nothing alarming to an untrained eye. To a physician, it was a signal. That slower pace wasn't weakness. It was a message. Her body was conserving resources, quietly acknowledging that its margin for error had narrowed. Clinically, walking speed is often observed over a short, fixed distance at a person's natural pace, not rushed and not exaggerated. When the average speed consistently falls below roughly 0.8 meters per second, outcomes begin to change in measurable ways. Independence becomes more fragile. Recovery from illness takes longer. Even cognitive resilience shows subtle decline. This is why walking endurance matters alongside speed. The ability to maintain a steady pace without excessive fatigue reflects not just strength, but coordination between energy production, oxygen delivery, and nervous system control. What makes this signal so powerful is its honesty. Walking speed cannot be optimized by willpower alone. It reflects the current state of the system as a whole. And unlike many medical measurements, it responds meaningfully to small, consistent improvements in daily movement. When pace is preserved or gently improved, it often signals that the brain, muscles, and cardiovascular system are still negotiating from a position of strength rather than survival. In aging medicine, that distinction changes everything. Strength is one of the most misunderstood signals in aging, largely because it has been misbranded for decades. Many people associate strength with athletes, gyms, or youth as if it were an optional trait rather than a biological requirement. In clinical reality, strength is not about appearance or performance. It is about survival capacity. When physicians observe declining strength in older adults, they are not thinking about fitness goals. They are thinking about resilience, recovery, and how much physiological stress the body can absorb before it begins to break down. From a biological standpoint, muscle is far more than a mechanical tissue. It functions as a metabolic and endocrine organ, actively regulating blood sugar, inflammation, hormone signaling, and even immune response. As muscle strength declines, the body's ability to manage glucose becomes impaired. Inflammatory signals rise, and vulnerability increases. This cascade does not announce itself loudly. It unfolds quietly, often disguised as fatigue, stiffness, or the sense that daily tasks require more effort than they used to. By the time weakness becomes obvious, the internal consequences are already well established. A useful way to think about strength is as the body's shock absorber. Every step, every stumble, every unexpected demand sends force through the system. When strength is sufficient, that force is absorbed and redistributed safely. When strength fades, the same stress travels directly into joints, bones, and soft tissue. Recovery slows. Injuries become more likely. Confidence in movement erodes. This is why doctors pay close attention to simple strength-related abilities that reflect whole-body capacity rather than isolated muscle groups. Grip strength, in particular, has emerged as one of the most reliable indicators of overall vitality. It correlates strongly with cardiovascular health, neurological integrity, and even cognitive outcomes. The ability to generate and sustain grip force reflects how well the nervous system communicates with muscle tissue. Similarly, leg strength reveals itself in one of the most fundamental human movements, rising from a seated position. Standing up from a chair requires coordination, balance, hip and thigh strength, and core stability. When this movement becomes difficult, It signals that multiple systems are under strain simultaneously. I remember Frank, an 81-year-old man, who mentioned almost casually that jars had become harder to open and getting out of chairs required more planning than before. He wasn't complaining. He was adapting. To a clinician, those adaptations were meaningful. They pointed to declining muscular reserve, not just in the hands or legs, but throughout the body. These were signals taken seriously because they often precede larger functional losses if left unaddressed. Clinically, grip strength is often observed by noting whether a firm squeeze can be sustained for roughly 10 seconds without trembling or rapid fatigue. Chair-related strength is reflected in the ability to rise repeatedly without relying on the arms for assistance. These observations are not about testing limits, but about understanding baseline capacity. When strength is preserved in these simple movements, it usually indicates that metabolic health, nerve signaling, and musculoskeletal integrity are still working in harmony. What makes strength such a powerful longevity signal is its ripple effect. Adequate strength supports balance, protects joints, stabilizes blood sugar, and preserves confidence in movement. It reduces fear, which itself is a driver of inactivity and decline. In aging medicine, strength is not a luxury. It is infrastructure. When it remains intact, the body negotiates aging from a position of stability rather than fragility. If this perspective is helping you see your body more clearly, subscribe to the channel. These conversations focus on the signals that protect independence long before problems show up. Balance is often treated as a minor concern, something people expect to lose gradually and quietly accept. In clinical medicine, it is interpreted very differently. Balance is a live, moment-to-moment report from the nervous system, reflecting how efficiently the brain integrates information from the eyes, inner ear, nerves, and muscles. When this integration is precise, movement feels natural and effortless. When it begins to slow or fragment, the body compensates by becoming cautious. That caution is not weakness. It is an early signal that the system is working harder to stay upright and oriented. What many people miss is that balance does not fail suddenly. It degrades subtly as communication between sensory systems becomes less synchronized. Vision may still be clear, muscles may still exist, yet the timing between them loses sharpness. The brain requires more data to make the same decisions it once made automatically. This increased demand shows up as hesitation, stiffness, and reduced confidence in motion. These changes are protective at first, but over time they increase fatigue and reduce overall activity, quietly accelerating decline. Recovery time tells a related story. After physical or mental effort, a resilient body returns to baseline efficiently. Breathing steadies, heart rate settles, muscles relax, and clarity returns. When this process slows, it indicates that physiological reserve is shrinking. The body is completing tasks, but it is doing so closer to its limits. This reduced margin makes everyday stresses feel heavier and less predictable, even when the tasks themselves remain unchanged. I think of Margaret, 73 years old, who noticed that ordinary errands required more rest afterward than they once did. She still completed everything, but the recovery took longer. To her, it felt like aging. To a clinician, it was a signal that resilience was waning. The nervous system was compensating, not failing, but compensation always comes at a cost. Balance and recovery are powerful because they reflect adaptability. A system that regains stability quickly can tolerate illness, stress, and disruption without spiraling into decline. When these signals remain strong, they protect independence quietly and continuously. When they weaken, the body whispers long before it falls. Frailty is one of the most misunderstood words in medicine, and that misunderstanding has consequences. It is often treated as a label, something that arrives late in life and signals an unavoidable decline. Clinically, frailty is not a fixed state. It is a pattern that reflects how well the body tolerates stress, adapts to change, and recovers from disruption. Long before frailty becomes obvious, the body reveals whether it is moving toward vulnerability or maintaining resilience. Biologically, frailty represents the cumulative effect of reduced muscle strength, diminished endurance, slower recovery, and narrowing adaptive capacity. None of these elements fail overnight. They fade gradually, interacting with one another. As muscle mass decreases, energy regulation becomes less efficient. As endurance drops, activity naturally declines. As activity declines, confidence erodes. Over time, the system becomes less forgiving. Small stresses produce outsized consequences. What once required adjustment now requires assistance. A helpful way to think about frailty is not as a cliff but as a slope. Movement along that slope can occur in either direction, depending on how the body is challenged and supported. Physicians pay close attention to this because early shifts along that slope strongly predict future outcomes. Hospitalizations become more frequent, recovery periods lengthen, independence becomes conditional rather than assumed. Importantly, these changes often begin while a person still appears outwardly fine. I think of Paul, 78 years old, who maintained his daily routines with quiet consistency. When life disrupted those routines, his recovery was steady rather than prolonged. Doctors noticed this not because he avoided setbacks, but because his body absorbed them without unraveling. That capacity to recover, to return to baseline, signaled resilience. It suggested that the systems governing strength, endurance, and adaptation were still communicating effectively. Clinically, frailty resistance is observed through patterns rather than single measurements. Unintentional weight loss, persistent fatigue, and reduced activity levels are watched closely because they often precede larger declines. These signs reflect how the body is allocating energy and whether it still has flexibility in reserve. When frailty resistance remains intact, the body retains options. When it erodes, choices narrow. This signal matters because it integrates everything that came before it. Walking speed, strength, balance, and recovery all feed into frailty resilience. Together, they determine whether aging unfolds with stability or fragility. Frailty is not the absence of health, it is the narrowing of resilience, and that narrowing begins quietly, long before most people realize the slope has shifted. As this conversation closes, it's worth returning to the perspective of Shigeaki Hinohara, who reminded both patients and physicians that aging well is measured by capability, not perfect numbers. The body reveals its true condition through function, how it moves, how it recovers, how it adapts to stress. These signals speak more honestly than any report. This view aligns with Peter Attia, who emphasizes that preserving function preserves independence and quality of life. Walking confidently, rising with ease, and recovering efficiently protect dignity. The body sends feedback every day. Listening to it reframes aging from fear to clarity and from decline to possibility.